Lately, there's been a lot of stirring and uproar over this blood moon idea. One of the main proponents of the significance of a blood moon is John Hagee. I just want to say to start, this stuff is total malarkey. It's baloney. It's not biblical at all, and it's just like the rest of the futurists who keep predicting some sort of imminent day of destruction or the coming of Jesus or the end of the planet or Armageddon or whatever. It's all baloney. Don't believe it, okay? Don't believe the fear that they try to instill in people's minds. I bought into it for years. I taught people to fear for years. It's all baloney. And so what I'd like to offer is a rational, reasonable, and biblical explanation of the blood moon. What exactly does it mean? It's super simple, super easy, and it simply involves metaphor. Metaphor that is actually explained in the Bible. And I'm going to read first where it all begins, basically, with this idea of a moon and its significance. In Genesis 37, some of you may remember the dream that Joseph had. I'm going to read this to you. It says he dreamed, 37 verse 9 through 11, he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers. And he said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me." Now keep in mind, Joseph was one of 12 brothers. And he says 11 stars bowed down to him, plus the sun and the moon. And he told it to his father and his brothers. And of course, his father was Jacob and his mother was Rachel. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to earth before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father observed this saying. In other words, Joseph has this dream that the sun, his father, the moon, his mother, and the 11 stars, his brothers, bowed down to him. And even Jacob acknowledges that. He says, "What is this dream that you've dreamed that your mother and I and your brothers bow down to you?" So he explains what it means. The sun represents Jacob, basically Jacob and Rachel, the head of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? Now, what is going on here is it's setting the stage for how Israel would identify itself under the covenant father or son, Jacob, and covenant mother, Rachel. Okay, the sun, moon, and the stars. They're the ones that basically birthed the 12 tribes of Israel. So then we go to Joel chapter 2, and watch what Joel says. "It shall be afterward," key word there, "I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And I will pour out my spirit on the slaves and on the slave women in those days. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood." Ah, scary. "Before the coming and the great and awesome day of Jehovah." So here's Joel prophesying that some 400 to 600 years before it would happen. Peter quotes this as fulfilled. Listen to this, Acts chapter 2. "Peter, standing up with the 11, in verse 14, lifted up his voice and said to them, 'Men and Jews and all who dwell at Jerusalem, let this be known to you and listen to my words. For these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is just the 3rd hour of the day. But this is that.'" So in other words, they were speaking in tongues and all this good stuff was going on. Peter says, "This is that." And yet so many people say that Joel is referring to our future or our day. Nope. Peter says, "This is that." Now he quotes from Joel. Quote, "And it shall come to pass in the last days." So Peter interprets Joel's word afterward as meaning last days, indicating that they were in the last days back then. "Shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh." And that's what happened in Acts chapter 2. "And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, your old men shall dream dreams. And in those days I'll pour out my spirit upon my slaves, my slave women, and they shall prophesy. And I will give wonders in the heaven above, miracles on the earth below, blood and fire, vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and glorious day of the Lord. End quote. So Peter is saying that was fulfilled. Joel was fulfilled. What? Sun turned into darkness, moon into blood. What's he referring to? He's talking about the end of Israel. Listen to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus went and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. Very clear. Jesus said, do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when shall these things be? That is, when is the temple coming down? And notice what they associated with it. And what shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So even the disciples associated the sign of his coming, which is a coming in judgment. Compare it with Isaiah. He uses this kind of language, coming in the judgment, coming in clouds. It's a metaphorical type use of language. Matthew 24, Jesus answers these disciples concerning the end of the temple, the end of Jerusalem, the end of the 12 tribes of Israel. Matthew 24, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, by the way, he's talking to Peter, James, John, and Andrew. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. He's simply talking about the end of Israel as they know it. The sun, moon, and the stars. The end of their economy and their identity as they knew it under the old covenant. Then shall the sign of the Son of Man appear in the heavens. What was the sign? It was the destruction of the temple. And all the tribes of the land shall mourn. What tribes? 12 tribes of Israel. He's explaining it. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the heavens with power and glory. Again, look at Isaiah chapter 19. God speaks with this type of language, coming in the clouds, as judgment. It's just language indicating him coming in judgment. And he shall send his angels with the sound of a trumpet. They shall gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. He's talking to the disciples. When its branch is still tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you likewise, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, he's talking to them. When you see all these things, know that it is near. When they saw it, what did they see? All the signs that Jesus predicted. By the way, the gospel preached in all the oikumene was one of the signs. Jesus said, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the earth as a witness to all nations. And then the end shall come. And we see that as fulfilled in Romans chapter 10, verse 18, Colossians 1, verses 4 through 6, Romans 16, 26 and 27, Colossians 1, verse 23. The gospel was preached to all the world back then, to all the world, to all the earth, to all nations. It says so in the Bible. Stop believing these fearmongers out there. They're trying to manipulate you with fear. And then Jesus says, so you likewise, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, when you see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors, which is why James said, behold, the judge is at the door. James chapter 5, verse 8 and 9. Truly I say to you, this generation, he was talking to them. He didn't say that generation. There's nothing in the Greek language that indicates it meant a future. This generation, Jesus says, shall not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. He said the same thing when he told the Pharisees he was going to take the kingdom of God from them. Matthew 21, verse 33 and following, and of course, Matthew chapter 23, where he tells the Pharisees, all of these things will come upon this generation. Jesus said, behold, I leave this house unto you desolate. He was going to destroy their temple, destroy Jerusalem, and they would all be scattered among the nations. That was fulfilled in the first century. The blood moon simply was the dissolution of the Jewish state, the Jewish economy, and the 12 tribes of Israel. It's gone. It was done. Jesus predicted it. What we see over there now has nothing to do with biblical prophecy. 1948 has nothing to do with biblical prophecy. Also, all the tribal records were destroyed. You can't even determine whether you were a member of the tribes of Israel. So we need to just get rid of this fear-mongering. It's destructive. It's destructive to the lives of those who are Christians. It also makes a mockery of Christianity because people keep going around saying, Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming. Blood moons trying to scare people. It's a joke. Please don't believe it. Live a life of joy as a Christian. Live a life of love and mercy and kindness, demonstrating the foundation of Christ's kindness toward us, and you'll be a happier person. The blood moon, a rational and reasonable and biblical explanation. Thanks for watching.